Music is often called a universal language, but the truth is a bit more complicated. Let's say that a performer on the piano and the South Indian classical flute wish to play together. As soon as they start, they may encounter something we can call a musical language barrier. Their instruments are in different tunings. Tuning is the science that conceives, locates, and names pitches, the pitches used to make music, at points on the acoustical spectrum, extending from low to high frequencies, like the color spectrum, from dark to light. Each instrument is tuned differently according to local tradition and custom, meaning that the piano is tuned one way and the flute is tuned another. So when they play together, they will produce harmonies that are not in tune. Is there an answer to this problem? As a music theorist and concert pianist myself, I'm constantly looking for ways to better understand the science of musical tuning. And about 4 years ago, I stumbled upon a centuries-old trove of writings suggesting an unusual and surprising remedy: a universal tuning system, which, like the proposed international language, Esperanto, could be used to make cultural exchanges once thought impossible possible. That system was called just Intonation, and its proponents extended around the world, from England to Germany to India to Japan, and to the rest of all of the continents, except Antarctica, of course. For the past several years, I have been traveling around the world to locate their writings and archives and to find the instruments that they built in order to showcase the merits of their system. When I find these instruments, I assist in their reconstruction, and then I challenge myself to learn how to play them. And today I would like to share with you some of the results of what I've found. But first, let's take a look at the science of tuning as it applies to the piano, which has 12 different keys, each corresponding to the 12 different types of pitches used in Western classical music. And so if you are a tuner responsible for tuning the piano, you do so by listening to the gaps in between those pitches, which we call intervals. And there are 3 types of intervals that most have to be in tune: the octave, or the distance between 8 white keys; the fifth, or the distance between 5; and the third, the distance between 3. So let's say that you decide to tune the instrument so that all fifths are perfectly in tune, all distances equivalent to 5 white keys on the instrument. Well, if you look at what you end up with, you'll find that actually the thirds and the octaves have gone slightly out of tune. So let's listen to how this would sound. First, we'll hear all of these intervals sounding simultaneously if they were tuned correctly. Listen to that smooth consonance. And now here it is if the whole instrument is tuned, only pay attention to perfect fifths. It's subtle, but do you hear that vibration? Listen again to the original. We want something smoother like that. So let's try again. And now let's tune the instrument using only perfect thirds. Well, if we check again, we'll find the result is even worse. Let's listen again to how it should sound. And now how it sounds tuned by perfect thirds. Clearly that's no good, right? We want this. It turns out that unfortunately there is simply no way to tune a collection of only 12 pitches so that all octaves, fifths, and thirds are perfectly in tune. And so it seems that we have to make a compromise in the size of those intervals. And we do this with a system called temperament, which consists of making small adjustments to the location of those pitches so that each of those intervals are different by such a small amount that we can hardly notice the error. The way that we accomplish a temperament might depend on the type of music. So if we need a lot of thirds, we might optimize those, sacrificing some of the consonants of the fifths, or the other way around. But no temperament will produce a perfect harmony. And when you listen to the sound of tempered music, you'll hear a tremulous quality. Let's hear what that sounds like. So not perfect, but for most musicians, it seems like this is the best you can do. But not for the just intonation theorists, who would accept nothing less perfect in that same piece that you heard than this. You hear how that tremulous sound is gone. Now we have clear, perfect consonants. So the just intonation theorists were able to accomplish this by a neat trick, by simply extending the number of pitches from 12 to all the way up to 53. And then they designed keyboards to make the system practical, with as many as 53 keys. These keyboards look crazy. And they're difficult to play, it's true, but not impossible, as I found when trying them myself. Actually, what you heard earlier was me playing this instrument, invented by an inventor from Japan after only 2 days of practice. It's more intuitive than you would think. Just intonation theorists were so confident in the results that they were able to accomplish that they preached for their system by likening it to the most radical social movements of the day, calling for the abolition of temperament as a way of drawing the world more literally together in perfect consonance. So what went wrong? Why don't we play these crazy-looking keyboards now? Well, for one thing, they're impractical. They're hard to mass produce, also on a large scale. And a simpler system emerged as the lingua franca, so to speak. Equal temperament with only 12 notes per octave, and so called because it locates each of those 12 pitches at equal points on the acoustical spectrum. Equal temperament, as lingua franca, answers the collaborative challenge that was posed at the beginning, but it comes at a cost. And this cost highlights the danger of looking for a universal system. The danger is actually not in terms of consonants, of course, because actually equal temperament is also not so bad. But in terms of two factors, which I'd like to close with today. The first is the issue of translation. If we accept the premise that each tuning system is like a language, then we can understand how translating a traditional song from one system into another, we are at risk of losing something of its essence, as when we translate a poem from one language to another. And then the other issue is the loss of tradition. As more and more musicians around the world adopt equal temperament, fewer use traditional tuning practices, creating a phenomenon of loss that we might liken to what linguists call language death. And so while we can appreciate the ingenuity of those who invented the just intonation system, the lesson might be that we can actually gain more from turning our energy away from developing a universal system and towards learning as many different languages, tuning systems, as we can. The richness of music comes from the fact that it is not a universal language, that musicians can speak in many different tunings, giving them a broader range of expression than any single universal system could ever accomplish. Thank you.